Oscar Valdes.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's actually pretty surreal because I grew up not too far from here. And when I was growing up here, I couldn't write a single line of code. I didn't have much access to technology at all. My parents' raft 27 years ago actually capsized in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And then we landed in this amazing city. And this amazing city really made me who I am today. And it gave me great influences, great mentors to look up to. And I'm happy to present to you guys today. So with that, let's get started. So a tech stack journey. ADP is a huge company. To give you an idea of what we're working with today, one of our flagship products that I'm going to walk you guys through helps contribute to some of these numbers. We pay 1 in 6 people. It's a top 5 business application. It's used to, help people get paid, retirement, benefits, all employee self-service, retirement self-service things. So this platform, it's been around for 10 years. It's anything that's been around that long, you're gonna have all kinds of junk that gets in there, people that have certain opinions about certain things. But really, it's always impressive when something is able to last this long and mature and continue to serve clients at such a good rate. There's millions of lines of code in this application from all different tech stacks, as I'll walk you guys through. And there's hundreds of developers that contribute daily to this application. So there's a lot of architectural decisions that get made that help teams be able to integrate at this, with such a large code base. So initially when this application was started, it was a pure AngularJS application. I know, huge trigger for the crowd that we currently have today. But, AngularJS was, credit. It provided a lot of things for the web frameworks that we have today. It was one of the first out there, one of the first to set a lot of the foundations and things that we believe in today. Then we went through the growing pains that a lot of other large enterprises went through. We decided we had to make it an Angular hybrid app because we had millions of lines of code already that was already AngularJS. So with that, we had a lot of growing pains. Our application was really slow because we were basically running 2 frameworks at once. And we still are a hybrid app, but it's migrated in the sense that we've ripped out all the AngularJS features that still live, that serve a lot of clients for different things. And we've pushed them as far to the corner of our application as possible, so they're lazily loaded when they need to be. And our app shell is purely Angular. And when we start diving into that app shell, this app shell now actually is Angular in the sense that it controls routing and app state, but we are replacing it with web components. The actual UI that you see is written in stencil. And that choice was made to kind of make us a little bit more foolproof for the future. We'll see how that decision ends up playing out. Our component library is purely stencil as well. And the way that we've architected the current application is gonna allow teams to write features in React, Vue. So that's kind of why we're here today. We wanted to see what a lot of you guys were doing in your current enterprise applications, because we've decided that we need to become a little bit more foolproof. There's a lot of good things coming from all of these different frameworks. and we didn't want to really tie down into one framework, and it also opens us up to a lot of talent. A lot of different teams at ADP can now contribute and can build benefits using one framework, where the other features could use, Angular or whatever. But it's really the technicalities around it are, to simplify it, we basically have set a protocol that all these micro front ends need to follow in order to communicate with one another and share app state and whatnot. So if there's something that like pay or retirement, some data that they share, we have protocols set in place that would allow them to share that set of data. But these decisions that we've been making at ADP hopefully will allow us to mature with a lot less growing pains in the future. So challenges that we face with this sort of architecture that's so distributed in a sense. Number one is performance. There's a huge, you give a lot when you start having such a distributed architecture like this. Your bundles aren't as optimal as they can be. There's things like module federation with Webpack 5 that can help a lot with this, but still it's not going to be as optimal as if you were probably sticking with, say Angular. But that's something that we're balancing with. We have a lot of things that we're playing with like Playwright to monitor bundles at runtime. Another thing that we struggle with is accessibility. Accessibility has been an issue for us for a while now. And now that things are a little bit more distributed, teams can deploy applications completely by themselves. The accessibility piece is a little trickier because we don't really know every single UI view that is deployed. So it's really up to the teams to account for all of their UIs. But really, we integrate Playwright with the DQ tools to we got some DQ folks in here, okay? But yeah, we're integrating a Playwright with the DQ tools to help us mediate some of those low-hanging fruit. And shout out to our boy Homer over here. He gave us some valuable tips today. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feedback, please come to the ADP booth. I'd like to open up for some questions because we really came here for feedback from the React community. So, any questions? I know lunch has got y'all. I know. Jason. Yeah, you.
How do you feel about Flutter?
I like Flutter, but the widget trees can get a little bit out of control. But I see a lot of potential there for the native cross-platform side. The web side is still not completely sold on. I still think that Vue and React and Angular are ways ahead still, but I think there's a lot of potential there. Question in the back. You had one, I think. We do. That's actually so. So we have two things going on currently. Since we ripped out the Angular shell on our web application, we're mimicking the same architecture on a mobile device, and the mobile device is written in Flutter. With that work, we're integrating a GraphQL layer to aggregate all of the hundreds of APIs that we have to give us the offline capabilities that come with like AppSync and that sort of thing. But yeah, GraphQL is going to be a very critical part of what we're currently doing today. So I think I heard it correctly. So how are we handling training for employees that are currently coming in? Yeah, very good question. So really, it's more so just letting engineers being able to dive into the problems hands-on. There's very little, I would say at ADP, there's very little hand-holding, and you kind of get the ability to kind of like make mistakes and run with it. Like Flutter was the perfect example. We had 0 Flutter engineers, no Flutter architect. It was kind of like, who's interested in building this new thing using this technology that allows us to, have native code cross-platform? And, there was a lot of people that did not raise their hand, and there was a group that did, and they got a chance to kind of prove that the technology worked. And then when you're able to prove it, you can kind of, that becomes your project to run with. Yeah, so they all have to load the web component library from our CD. So they all have to load that from our CDN. They all do it. So this is just one of our applications. So this one loads it through Angular, ends up lazily loading these web components. But different applications load it differently. Some of the more legacy applications can't load it dynamically like that, so they have to load it before their actual application loads. But the newer stack applications actually will load their main bundles first, so that their app shell renders, or if they have a server-side rendered app shell, which a lot of companies have nowadays, then they load it. So it's just loading JavaScript at the end of the day. So it's up to them to really decide how they want to load it. But the flexibility is nice because it's one component library across the board. It's been controversial even within our own company having a web component-based component library. Some people would rather have something that matches their framework, like Material. But just an architectural decision that was made. Yes, we looked at React Native, we looked at Flutter, we looked at NativeScript, we looked at Ionic, we looked at everything. There were pros and cons across the board for each. Flutter was just a personal preference that really matched more so for the direction of how we wanted not just UI developers, how they were coding, but more so the approach at how we looked at UIs in general. At ADP, we struggled a lot with building UIs strictly for web and then making them responsive and sticking it in a mobile device. We really wanted something that would force developers to write it specifically for mobile, in the sense that it would also make designers have to design specifically for mobile. So the decision wasn't just a technological decision, it was also, the dynamics around that. So we were Selenium before, so we were Protractor before, and then everyone knows what happened with Protractor, and big shout out to the Protractor community because they did so much, and then we went to Selenium, and we still use Selenium. So we still use Selenium for a lot of our actual native automation tests, and then we had a POC that we did for almost a month on Cypress versus Playwright. And the team that ended up picking Playwright, the big seller for them with Playwright was we have a lot of QA that is not technical at ADP, and they were able to use some of the Playwright tools to automate, have some of those tests like automated for them. So that was a big selling point for them with Playwright. Waller, I know you want to ask a question. You're like, The bundle problem is always, with something like with this sort of architecture, it's going to exist. It's not going to be completely, probably as foolproof as something like if I were to build something completely with Angular out of the box, or React out of the box. But Webpack 5, a lot of things with model federation that we're looking at to make sure at least that things are using the same same versions of the dependencies and that kind of thing. We're playing a lot with Playwright right now to be able to route across the application and flag bundles. So kind of how you can set bundle budgets at build time. We can't do that really with our architecture, so we have to do that at runtime and do runtime analysis of our application and what features are violating our bundle budgets and whatnot. Yeah, so that's a big reason why we've moved towards this architecture, because there was always people proposing different technologies for certain things, and the pushback was really just we're not using it, so why would we introduce it? And that really wasn't a good answer, because really you can use any technology to solve any problem, and it could be a good reason. If you can do it, and if you can do it, if it's performant enough, there's no reason not to. And that's why we've moved towards this approach. And it's really, it normally starts off at ADP. It starts off with a POC. You can prove that you can do a small piece of it, and then you run with it. And then once it's in the code base, you kind of just you have to make sure that it follows that protocol that I talked about. That's very specific to us. But so that these applications can communicate, but you just have to conform to that so that it can be streamlined across the entire platform. But once you do that, you're good to go. Anything else? You want one? Oh, you came to the hangout. We're gonna hang, and we're gonna hang a ton. What data? So with something this big, the data is everywhere. I mean, we've got SQL Server, we got Mongo, but it's not just one place, because there's even mainframes in our application to a certain degree. So the data is everywhere, but it's it's not in one place. That would be the answer. So Mongo's our most used data. We don't use Hadoop, as far as I know, but yeah, we use Mongo's our main data storage. But our application is so distributed and we've got so many microservices. We've got hundreds and might even be thousands of microservices that store data, probably not as efficiently as it should be, just because of the historical context of how long the application's been around and all that stuff. But yes, the way we handle data currently could be optimized a ton and could probably be shared through something like Hadoop. So the MongoDB has been for us has been around for a while. So like I haven't been a part of those conversations per se. But I haven't been a part of any conversations to modernize the data, but we are having the conversations to more intelligently use our data to surface our UIs more intelligently. So, adding some TensorFlow in order to service UI views more intelligently. So if we know you always come to ADP, and I know I come to ADP, I just want to know when I got paid. And so, there's no reason for me to be landing on the benefits tile to be the first tile I see or whatever. If you always come to retirement, that kind of thing is what we're looking at on how to, more intelligently use our data. Yes. That is something that we are in the works of, in the very, very early works on. This architecture that I just described makes it a little tricky because we have to decide what do we actually want the user to download. But yes, it is something that we've been looking at. So basically 10 years ago. So I think the first commit, I mean, yeah, almost 10 years ago. So it's about 10 years old with probably around 200, 300 devs coding on it daily. So yeah, it's pretty big. Sweet, well, I think that is my time. Thank you so much, guys, for the questions. I'll be at the ADP booth. And feel free to come argue some tech. And we're always open to that. We have lots of fun with that. Have a good one, y'all.